Hello. This week, I'm going to be discussing the Generating Ideas assignment for Unit 2 and the writing process. So let's go. You can find the assignment sheet for the Generating Ideas for this unit in our current learning module. Do please be sure to check the unit overview document. In this video, I am using my night classes documents as an example, so the due dates might look a little different. So do just be sure to check your due dates in your class's unit overview document. So as I'm sure you recall, for the second essay, you're going to be writing a comparison and contrast paper. And for the Generating Ideas assignment, I'm asking you to write a 250-word reflection about your topic. So the first thing you'll want to do is decide which topic it is you're going to write about for essay 2. And you might wish to revisit the Padlet that we created to get some ideas or perhaps see the comments that your classmates left on your post. But once you've settled on your topic, that's when you're ready to write your 250-word reflection. So the purpose of this reflection really is to make sure that you have selected a topic that is appropriate for the assignment and that is also appropriate in its scope. And I'm hoping by the end of this assignment, you feel very confident about the topic that you've selected, and you've also started to generate some ideas about what you might possibly write about. So do be sure to read the essay 2 assignment sheet before you get started if you haven't done so already. And of course, you can send any questions my way that you might have about it. But again, basically all you're doing for the Generating Ideas assignment is answering these 7 questions in regards to your topic, and you're going to write about 250 words for that initial post. Now, I'm going to quickly show you on Blackboard how to go about turning this assignment in, but I just want to point out and remind you folks that I write very detailed assignment sheets. So even if you're at home and you're not remembering sort of where to go on Blackboard or how to post it, hopefully you can find the answer to that question in the document. So this document does include the due dates for the initial post as well as for the 2 replies. And again, check your unit overview document for the due dates for your class. The next item in the document tells you how to find your chat partners. And it even goes on and tells you some little sort of frequently asked questions, like what do I do if my partner does not reply? So of course, if you have a question, the first thing you should do is come review the assignment sheet itself. And then if it still is lingering in your mind as unclear, then I would welcome you to contact me with that question. When you are ready to turn in your initial post for your Generating Ideas assignment, all you'll need to do is visit the current learning module on Blackboard. You are going to click into your writing groups. Hopefully you've enrolled in a group already, but if not, you can just do it right now. You can select whether you want to be in the in-person group for essay 2, or if you'd rather be in the Zoom group for essay 2. So let's pretend I selected the in-person group for essay 2. At the top, I'm going to see my group members. As you recall, that's how you find sort of your chat partners, as I said in the document. Down here in the group tools, that's where you can find the discussion board. You should find it already ready to go, available for you with the forum for the Generating Ideas assignment, and then a little later in the unit for the rough draft and peer review, but we're not worried about that yet. So just as a quick reminder to you folks, when you're ready to post, you will click the forum to enter it, and then you will create a thread. You will not be able to see anybody else's posts until you create your own initial thread, and that just helps us to avoid plagiarism within the Blackboard environment. So hopefully that explains the Generating Ideas assignment. Excuse me. If you do have any questions, of course, I encourage you to contact me. So if you want to pause here for a moment, you can feel free to do that. And otherwise, I'm going to jump over to a discussion of the writing process. So as you know, for this week, I asked you to read chapter 2 in your Successful College Composition textbook. And this chapter focuses on the writing process. And what I would really love to point out and emphasize for the writers in my class this semester is that the writing process is often conceived of as a straight line from pre-writing all the way through to the final draft. And I want to encourage you to shake up that perception this semester, because as you see before you, the writing process, in fact, is not linear, and it will not look the same for every person. And in fact, in order to create the most effective writing processes, they should not look the same for every person because not all of us respond positively or as well to the same kind of ideas. So this semester, what I would really encourage you to do is to work on creating a writing process for yourself that works for you. And while we're focusing on this in English classes, my hope is that you can take this effective writing process with you into any writing assignment that you may need to do. And as you know, you're doing writing in basically all of your classes, maybe not in math or something like that, but most of your classes you're having to do writing. So if I direct your attention to the image that I have in front of you, I think it's a really good visual demonstration of the writing process because in the middle we see this core, right? This idea that we're creating something through writing. And surrounding it, we have kind of the five main elements of the writing process. So we have the pre-writing process, what we're doing with generating ideas. We have the drafting process that relates to our peer review. We have the revision and editing process. Again, workshops and peer reviews relate to that. And then finally, we come to the publication step. So as a student, you might consider that publication to be the submission step. That's sort of how you publish your work in my class. But notice that these elements are not presented on a straight line because most writers do not move through them in a straight line. There are very few writers who sort of one and done, A to Z, move through a draft and are able to turn it in. So if you find yourself in the writing process returning recursively to elements, in other words, you're backtracking to visit something, you're in the editing process, you're maybe diving really deeply into your common use, and you suddenly notice that you need to return to the drafting stage because you're 300 words short of the word count and you need to draft another page. That's okay. So, sort of long story short here, I would really love to encourage you this semester to develop a writing process that works for you. And as your textbook suggests, there are many elements to this writing process that we don't necessarily confront in my class. So, for example, the Successful College Composition textbook offers some really great advice about writing outlines, but I don't require you to use them. That does not mean that you cannot use them. It just means that I'm not going to collect it and give you a grade on it. So I really encourage you to play with your process this semester and determine what works well for you. And if for some reason you did not really carefully read the entire chapter, for chapter 2 for the writing process, I want to encourage you to do that because it gives a lot of really excellent advice for crafting a superlative essay. And it also answers questions that students often have about the writing process. So like, for example, students often ask me, how do I go about writing an effective title for an essay? Well, on page 65 of the writing process, on page 65 of the Successful College Composition textbook, it discusses how to go about writing an effective title. If you're worried about creating an engaging opening in your introductory paragraph, you can see on page 69 in your textbook, the funnel technique is discussed. So again, this isn't necessarily something we're going to go through and workshop in class, but this is something that might work well for your writing process. One more writing element that students sometimes struggle with is writing an effective conclusion. So again, if you jump to page 70 in your textbook that was included in your reading for this chapter, you will find guidelines about writing a conclusion and sort of the anatomy of a strong conclusion. In other words, what it typically contains. So part of your strong creation of your process for this semester, I hope, includes really carefully reading that chapter and considering how it applies to your own preferences as far as writing goes. Now, some of the stages of the writing process are talked about throughout this chapter, and the first one is pre-writing. And our book claims that all writers rely on steps and strategies to begin the writing process. And I certainly know from my, 16 years as a teacher and 6 years as the director of the Writing Center, which I used to do at IVCC, all writers need these beginning steps. It's also extremely common for writers to experience just getting started as the most difficult step. So if that's something you're experiencing, number one, just know that that's like super common and normal, so you shouldn't feel stressed about it. And number two, there are resources available for you. So the tutors in the Writing Center would be a great place to go to help develop ideas on how to get started, or I'd be very happy to talk you through it in my office hours. So please keep us in mind. But as I mentioned, the steps in the writing process are typically pre-writing, outlining, a rough draft, revising, and editing. I'm not requiring outlines this semester, but you might find it useful. Typically, a writer will choose a general topic and then narrow to a more specific topic. So for example, in class tonight, we were talking about some of the database articles that we might be writing about, and one of the options was youth sports. Now, that would be much too broad of a topic for essay 2, right? You could write an encyclopedia about youth sports. What we want to think about is how can we narrow our focus to a more specific topic? So just off the top of my head, an example topic that might work a little better than just youth sports might be comparing and contrasting youth girls soccer to youth boys soccer and finding out about those two sort of different elements of youth sports. But hopefully you can see how that example is much more narrow and a more appropriate fit for like a 4 to 5 page paper than writing about just, youth sports overall. So the pre-writing process includes any kind of brainstorming techniques that you might use to generate ideas. And it's also a place where hopefully you can take your abstract ideas and make them a little bit more concrete. When you have chosen a good topic, it will appeal to the audience and fit the purpose of the writing. So do keep your classmates and your professor in mind when you're selecting your topic. Why do we care about this and why is it relevant to us? So that's pre-writing. Some key takeaways from drafting, and one of the most important ones that I wanted to emphasize is that your thesis statement should lay out the plan for your whole essay, right? So in other words, as it says on the slide here, your body paragraphs should closely follow that path that your thesis statement sets forth. Now, if you are stuck on the thesis statement, my advice to you, again, the non-linear writing process, is to actually craft your body paragraphs first. So think about some main ideas, think about, the points of comparison between your two subjects, draft those paragraphs, making sure that they each have one main idea, and then grab the main idea from each paragraph and be sure that it is previewed in that thesis statement. So you can sort of think of it like a little math problem. Topic sentence plus topic sentence plus topic sentence is thesis statement, because those topic sentences highlight the main idea of your paragraph. So back on my slide here, we have a reminder that strong body paragraphs contain evidence that supports the thesis, and that the support is specific, detailed, and relevant for that thesis. So during this unit, we'll start working on selecting really good, reliable evidence. And that's one of the reasons we're using our database, is because we have a reliable source already provided for us. Evidence that you might include in an essay includes things like facts, judgments, testimonies, and possibly personal observations, but we're not going to include those for our second essay. There's a mention of some different types of reliable sources. The one that we are looking at is a library database where experts have sort of already vetted everything and we know that it's reliable. Finally, at the end here, we have a topic sentence presenting one point of our thesis statement, and then the information in the paragraph supports that point. So that helps create what we call a coherent and unified essay, where everything is kind of building and supporting each other. The last key takeaways I wanted to review have to do with revising and editing. Again, one of the most important stages of the writing process, and I think one of the ones that gets shoved to the back burner the most often, simply because writers run out of time. So I'm actually going to jump to the last point on this slide first, in order to remind you to carefully budget your time for editing and proofreading. It can often end up taking longer than you might think, and it is such a hugely important step in the writing process. I will not say that it is always obvious when a student has not revised or proofread or edited their essay. I'm sure some of them sneak by, but very often it is painfully obvious when that writing has not been revised, has not been proofread, and has not been edited. So do make sure you leave some time in that writing process for that very important final stage. So as I've mentioned before, revision is kind of big picture changes. So maybe we're adding or cutting or changing information in order to improve our content. When we move to the editing step, that's when we're taking a second look at things like words, sentences, phrasing. We're looking at grammar and sentence structure and punctuation. Okay. When we're talking about unity and coherence, it has to do with sort of how all of our ideas hang together in the essay. So in other words, all the ideas in every paragraph support a topic sentence for that paragraph. And then each of the topic sentences supports the thesis. They're all a brick that builds the house of your essay. When our writing is coherent, it is easy for our reader to follow. So that's where we use things like transitional words and phrases to create a very smooth reading experience for your audience. We do prefer in academic writing, clear and concise writing with no unnecessary words. So we encourage you to cut the fluff when it comes to academic writing. And finally, peer reviews can be quite valuable. So I know it might be challenging as a first-year writer to offer feedback or criticism on someone else's work, but they can be very, very useful. So I will encourage you to go beyond flattery and to go beyond sort of I agree with you or I disagree with you type of feedback to really offer that writer some avenues for improving their work. Even the best writers in the world can usually improve their work based on feedback. So I encourage you to offer it to each other. So those are my takeaways from this week from our textbook and also from the Generating Ideas assignment. As usual, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, thanks for listening and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.